some of the more important bizarre elements, some of the stranger structures in your body. We talked about this last week real briefly, and a bunch of people pinged on it. You know, it kind of stoked everyone's interest. In my opinion, just on a whole, the concept of, I guess, JSeals, unnatural seals, or these what are ultimately genetic alterations that are placed within, you know, the human body at specific intervals in our evolution. It's my opinion that a lot of these were actually set to interact, activate, or to just really kick up in terms of activity. Around 2008, 2010, there's a couple of other sources online that talk about how these were set to activate on a greater level in the body, but let's talk a little bit about what that is. What are we talking about here? Well, as a whole, just the overall kind of subject is negative energetic manifestations. That's kind of an all-encompassing kind of term that I use to describe implantation, entity attachment, just the layers of what we will call the parasitic construct that we're interacting with. And so, in addition to a number of other strange energetic manifestations, one area that has come into greater focus recently is the concept of JSeals, death seals, unnatural seals, crucifixion implants. They're all kind of the same thing, you guys. There will be a little bit of a difference in the specific function or the specific interaction or the commonly accepted belief as to what these things do. And I think that you'll find people will just refer to them differently. But what they're really talking about are genetic alterations or mutations that have been placed within the human body. And get this, is where it gets weird, corresponding points on the Earth grid. Meaning that these are things that are placed within us and also within the Earth. They interact in somewhat of a symbiotic relationship to have a very particular type of consciousness dampening or blocking effect. Some people might even say they effectively can block the awakening process of certain people. That remains to be seen. I think that, you know, a human consciousness will awaken at a certain point in the incarnational cycles, regardless of what's going on. Eventually they'll get there. But let's talk about what's going on here, you guys. JSeals, aka Jehovian seals, supposedly placed within key areas of the human body and the Earth grid by what some refer to as the Jehovian Anunnaki. Who are the Jehovian Anunnaki? You know, we're not going to get too far into, you know, all of this stuff, but to put it simply, I believe they are one of the races that had a huge hand in the genetic alteration and the subsequent creation of humans, meaning that on a certain point in you know, the incarnational cycles of the planet Earth itself, there was there's been several invasions that have taken place, but over the course of human development, we have been faced with certain specific genetic alterations that were placed in specific areas of the body and the Earth by these invading forces. One of those we call the, you know, Jehovian Anunnaki. You can think of these seals like roadblocks in your energy system, artificially placed kind of stoppages or blockages, or just, you know, just rocks in the stream that are going to be messing with the flow. They'll be diverting the energy flow over here or that way, or they'll just stop it from reaching certain areas. The idea behind this is that it stops the DNA from activating. It stops the awakening, it stops the ascension process, and ultimately it keeps human life within a predictable life cycle range. It causes our cells to die at a certain time. It causes our consciousness to only reach a certain point of self-knowledge. But the how and why and where and the specifics behind each of these, to be honest with you guys, we're still learning it. It's all theoretical. But what we have understood is that at certain places within the human body, there are commonly accepted elements of genetic mutation or energetic blockages that seem to cause effects on everyone. And where are those? Key locations for JSeals. Well, you guys can see them here on the images, but they tend to ride down the left side of the body. Does that mean that they only affect the left side of the body? Well, actually, they can affect either side, the whole body, elements of just that area, or even specific different things for different individuals. But we tend to find these along the spleen meridian, the urinary bladder meridian, which interacts very heavily with ancient ancestral fear, the heart chakra, which allows the connection or the lack of connection between ourselves and others, the psoas muscle, the lymphatic system, a number of areas in the body. And I'm just going to check your comments real quick. I see you guys coming in there. Thank you. Thank you. Excellent, excellent. Are you born with JSeals on? Yes, I believe we are, Sabine. Thank you for that question. If you want to get technical and if you want to start doing some research, and you guys are going to find when you start researching JSeals, you're going to find a bunch of websites and they're all going to have the same copy-pasted information. It'll be a little bit reworded version of it. You can tell somebody will have read someone else's, sentence or article, and they'll kind of reformulate it into something a little bit different. In a strange roundabout way, I've also reformulated some of that information, because the reality is there aren't that many real solid sources for how these things interact. But by my understanding and the research that I've done and the own intuitive knowledge that I've received, Sabine, I believe that we are born with these structures in the body. They are just part of what we come in with. Now, some of us will have more in some areas, others in other areas, and by more, I mean just more of an energetic blockage there. It's different for everyone, but I believe that these are placed on a collective level. How do you diagnose if one has JSeals? I believe that we all will have these energies in our body, like I just said, but the level to which will be dependent upon the issues that we have, what's going on in our body, the blockages, et cetera, et cetera. When we look at where they sit along the body here, we see the very first of those right at the top, interacting with what I believe to be the crown chakra, with the energy that enters the body. Basically, these are going to be stopping you from awakening, stopping you from ascending, stopping you from activating the DNA strands in the body. But we're going to do some work on those today, you guys. The Zeta Seal is, I think, something that's important to mention, because I've also heard people talking about it recently. What I believe this is, you guys, and Lisa Renee is an incredible source for what I believe to be very reputable information. She's also incredibly dense, incredibly complex. But I believe to be the Zeta Seal to be a frequency fence. What is a frequency fence? It's kind of a blockage layer. You can imagine it kind of like an electrified fence. When you touch it, you're going to get a shock. And so what is the frequency fence? In this case, it's a layer of miasmatic energy that is placed outside the heart chakra, right in between the 4th and 5th DNA strand. If there is a quote unquote in-between place, in between DNA strands, that might be an incorrect way to describe that. But what we're finding is that this Zeta Seal is one of the blockages over the 4th density activation points in the body that pertain to heart energy, green ray energy, intimate connection, allowing the Christ consciousness to activate in the body, and ultimately moving up through the higher chakras into the soul star chakra, which is where a lot of us begin to receive expanded downloads, expanded mission stage activation. The Zeta Seal was apparently one of the genetic alterations placed in the human body through genetic tampering by the Zeta Reticuli beings, I guess, from the Zeta Reticuli star system. A lot of people refer to them as grays. I believe, you guys, that the gray aliens are actually most of the time what we call programmed life forms, meaning that a lot of them are sort of drones. They're not necessarily sentient beings. They're almost like a glove that is inhabited by another form of consciousness. But what I believe is that the Zeta Seal was one of the elements that was placed within our etheric architecture by these beings over the course of time as an additional layer of separation from the higher self complex, inner sights, our ability to connect with our higher self dimensional councils, et cetera, et cetera. We're going to mention a little bit more, you guys, before we move on. We did have a little bit of a talk about crucifixion implants and some of the group stuff over the weekend. I want to mention those because they're essentially the same thing as JSeals. However, what we're finding is that some of the specific places along this JSeal alignment on the left side of the body tend to have a specific interaction with our consciousness. And what we're discovering is that right at the top of the head, right at the crown, we have this thing that Lisa Renee calls the crown of thorns. What I believe that to be is a blockage, or an artificially placed kind of blockage at the crown chakra that will stop people at certain stages from like connecting with the higher self. I believe that's what she talks about when she talks about the crown of thorns. And I think that's just another way to look at these structures in the body, just another term, another way to refer to it. But Crucifixion implants refer to the JSeal placements along the urinary bladder and the spleen meridian that promote the genetic predisposition to serve a God outside ourselves and to give our power away to an outer authority. For some practitioners, they will even see apparently what looks like a cross or a crucifix, you know, like the cross image in the body. You know, I haven't specifically seen that, but what I have found is a frequency within the human body that does appear to make people very, very predisposed to serve, to follow, to deify, to give their power away. And so I believe that one of the functions of that crown of thorns implantation at the top of the head is one of those things that causes us to willingly go into a state of suffering or separation from the higher self complex. And so these play a big role in the pre-programmed cell death technology. And so what is cell death technology? What does that actually mean? I believe that these are frequencies that were programmed within these JSeal structures that keep the human body in a death cycle, meaning that we will only live for so long. We will only live so many years. We will have a pre-programmed rapid aging sequence that will take place at certain stages in the life cycle. I believe it is absolutely possible to divert, or maybe we could even say subvert, that cell death technology in the body through activating our DNA, through, you know, consistently demonstrating sovereign awareness over our energy fields. And ultimately, I believe one of the primary points for that cell death technological blockage is in that zeta seal in the chest and up at the top of the head. But we're going to be working through some of the JSeal structures in the body in a little bit, you guys. But another role of JSeals is to further stop the merging of the left side divine feminine template and the right side masculine template. What we're discovering is that, you know, a lot of us, well, I shouldn't say a lot of us, all of us have what I believe to be the divine feminine and the divine masculine kind of split within the body. It tends to be on the left side for the feminine. It tends to be on the right side for the masculine, but I have found multiple people in which that's flip-flop. So sometimes, you know, people will have the feminine elements on the right side, masculine on the left. I think it's different for each of us, but what I believe one of the overall functions and the designs behind JSeal technology in the body is to continue the split between those two elements of the self and those two archetypal, you know, versions of you. If they're able to keep the divine feminine masculine, you know, separated within each of us, we're never able to fully join an element or join and really realize the true nature of the self. And so I'm kind of rambling at this point, you guys, but what you can see is there are a number of overarching soul group monadic elements or maladies or issues or frequencies that come into play when we look at JSeals. While they will have a specific individual symptomatic reaction for each of us, there's something that affects our group, our people as a whole. And so what we're going to be doing in a few moments, you guys, is we're going to be working through some of those structures. We're going to be breaking through some of the JSeals in the body, and also harmonizing and opening up the solar plexus and just some of the areas in your body that are going to help you gain an additional layer of awareness. And so if you have any questions, any more questions about JSeals, throw them in there, you guys. I do want to mention, if you look at the image over here on the right, we will notice that we have, you know, this outline, this Merkabah shape, what is essentially the tree of life, kind of superimposed over the human body. And I will just mention, because it will come up in nearly all of your research on JSeals. If you guys go Google this right now after this class, you're going to notice that they mentioned that the JSeals sit along the 7th axiotonal line within the human body. And you may sit there going, well, you know, what is that? And why did we not mention it here today? Well, the axiotonal lines are a kind of like a map grid, a network of lines that are that span the human body, but not only the human body, the earth grid, and ultimately what I believe to be the sort of outline or the mapping or the intelligent grid network of what on an individual level becomes the light body, and on a collective level comes this sort of vehicle by which we begin to experience what I call the social memory complex. And so these axiotonal lines make up the surface of the earth, but they also make up specific grid points and vertices within the human body. And so they talk about the 7th axiotonal line and it being a placement in which many of these JSeals are attached. And so what I believe that pertains to is the 7th dimensional kind of template within the body. And I could be totally wrong. This is one of the areas that I am just now beginning to understand as well. But I believe as we begin to harmonize and align the axiotonal grid structures within the human body, we begin to break through not only the JSeals, but we allow for the creation of what I believe to be the Merkaba, or the light body, that sort of intelligent kind of light structure that we exist as outside of this physical container. So I believe that these JSeals are interacting with us on a number of individual and soul group levels.